Hello aspirants, welcome to another discussion for paper 1. This is for unit 2, which is Sociology as Science. Now let's quickly, as has been the practice, let's quickly start with the PYQs for each and every subunit of this particular unit, and then look at what is it that the PYQs are requiring, what is it that they demand, and then work with some value addition, keywords, key pointers, etc. So the first subunit is science, scientific method, and critique. So let's look at the PYQs that have been there in the past few years. So here we are. What are the characteristics of scientific method? Do you think that scientific method in conducting sociological research is foolproof? Describe the basic postulates of scientific method. How far are these followed in sociological research? Does scientific method make sociology a science? Illustrate your answer with Durkheim's method. Is sociology a science? So that's broadly what you have. So basically, you have scientific method. That is something that's coming very clearly. But before that, let's just quickly have some clarity around science as well. Very quick pointer. So the definition, right? Sage Dictionary of Sociology simply says that science refers to the systematic investigation and understanding of the world around us. You can just stop here. Or you could even add, it aims for objectivity, uses rigorous techniques of empirical testing, and strives for explanations of wide applicability. So this is the Sage Dictionary of Sociology definition of science. You can always use it. Now there are of course the core aspects. So you can talk about science as a radical departure from common sense, systematic explanations. So we are looking at common sense again. Science, common sense, radically away from each other. Science is distant, science is detached, it's an abstract exercise, science is essentially neutral. Science is primarily critical in spirit, meaning it has a doubting character, it has a doubting foundation to it. It neglects the immediate value of anything, it is always doubting. Then, so these are some of the pointers about science, but I shared with you a proper sociological definition on science. Now, why is it that sociology is interested in science? So if you're looking at sociology's interest in science, why on earth should sociology be interested in science, right? So this is very simple. Sociology treats science as a social phenomenon, right? So to begin with, science is a social phenomenon. That is why sociology is interested in. Now, some of the things as a result of which sociology takes interest in science is, you can refer to maybe 2-3 pointers. One is scientific objectivity, neutrality, accuracy, etc. These are things that have interested sociologists, particularly in the early phase of sociology. Sociology is definitely interested in the practice of science, not science, but practice of science in any society. And definitely a very important point, science majorly contributes to social change in society, and sociology, of course, is committed to studying social change. You also have Robert Merton, and I'm sure you already know the name. Robert K. Merton has also, because he was one phenomenal sociologist of science, and Merton has written about science, but the value addition here is, where exactly did Merton write about it? So we know about the imperatives, universalism, communism, organized skepticism, disinterestedness. We know about them. So I will not go into those details. But where exactly did Merton write about these? So Merton, he published a paper in the year 1942 titled A Note on Science and Technology in a Democratic Order. In this particular paper, Merton talks about the ethos of science, and in that he lists down these 4 imperatives that you already are aware of. I'm just sharing with you the value addition, right? The source, where and when did Merton write about these? Let's look at scientific method. Now, scientific method was first outlined by Sir Francis Bacon, who is a 16th, 17th century philosopher, mathematician. And basically, Bacon's argument was that scientific method provides logical and rational problem solving. And to this date, it is argued that scientific method happens to be the best possible way in which we can distinguish truth from non-truth or truth from fiction. Now, some of the important features of scientific method, again, very quickly, through scientific method, you end up discovering knowledge about the natural world based on formulating hypotheses, testing them empirically, etc., etc. The most defining aspect of scientific method is that it is systematic, it is sequential. So scientific method is not random, haphazard. There are stages and you follow those stages quite diligently. Then three core characteristics of scientific methods are that scientific methods are unbiased, scientific methods are falsifiable, and they are reproducible. So that's in the background. Now, critique. So you have science, scientific method, and critique. Now, critique is not, general idea of critique. In this particular subunit, critique is suggesting the critique of science and scientific method, right? So we are basically looking at critiques that are offered of science and scientific method. I'm sure you're already aware of these, but let me just draw your attention to a few that you might have read or you might are already aware of, but you might not be. So I'm just taking my chances. Now, scientific method, one of the first critiques is scientific method is one of the methods of doing research. It's not the only method of doing research. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. Reality that we have all around us is multifaceted. So we must have plurality of methods, and just one method will not help. So scientific method in that sense is a problem. Science, of course, cannot deal with human problems because social life cannot be laboratized. You cannot control social life. So it's very difficult for science to deal with human problems. Then subjective things, which are so important for us, for our reality, subjective things cannot be measured, they cannot be quantified. So this is also a serious problem with reference to scientific method. Then objectivity, of course, is somewhat impossible in scientific research. Objectivity is somewhat impossible in sociological research. So if we are going ahead with sociological research, scientific method might not be the only way out. We might have to experiment with, we might have to work out with other methods, other techniques, etc. And then there are, of course, thinkers' references. You have Gunnar Myrdal. I'm sure who has written on this, Gunnarmyrdal. Gunnar Myrdal highlights in this famous work, Objectivity in Social Research, that total objectivity can never be achieved and can at best be considered an illusion. So total objectivity, according to Myrdal, is at best an illusion. It can never be achieved because sociological research is not free of a set of viewpoints. You always start with a viewpoint. In fact, if you finalize any research topic, that in itself implies that there is a certain degree of subjectivity. Now, just a few additional insights on scientific method. So, for example, you have somebody like Karl Popper. So we have Karl Popper, we have Thomas Kuhn, and we have Paul Verhoeven. Right? Now, Popper, he wrote this book, The Logic of Scientific Discovery, then Conjectures and Refutations, and Popper and Kuhn are considered as post-positivists. We'll come to post-positivism in some time. But scientific methods, Popper says, scientific methods also also have assumptions. And scientific knowledge is never final, it is always provisional. So whatever you arrive at is something that you agree with at the moment, but there is always a possibility of some newer discovery, some newer realization, and then suddenly whatever you held as sacred, as final, is no more the case. Popper also says science is not free. Science is very much colonized by state on the one hand and capitalism on the other. So contrary to the commonsensical perception that science is free, science is not. Then you have Thomas Kuhn, who wrote this fantastic book, The Structure of Scientific Revolution. And Kuhn also talks about the fact that science gradually does not evolve the truth. because very often what also happens is in the course of a scientific inquiry, you realize that you are heading in the wrong direction, right? So a lot of research in dark matter, in string theory, well, after years and years of research, you realize that you've run into a dead end. You were never really heading towards the truth. So Kuhn also points out that it is simply not the right thing to imagine or to assume that science or scientific inquiry is always heading towards the truth. So that's another important pointer. Paul Feyerabend, as I pointed out, there's a famous work called Against Method. In that particular work, he also points out issues with science's superiority. And he says, if scientific mode of knowledge becomes the most superior mode of knowledge, then there is a possibility that science also will become very totalitarian and very aggressive. And he spoke about what we call theoretical anarchism, right? Meaning that let there be multiple theories, let there be no one theory that is taking care of everything. Let there be no theoretical order, let there be theoretical anarchism. And his proposition is that science must be separated from the state. So if you have these things in mind, then of course all of these questions can very well be categorically, properly taken care of.